So it's 4:05. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone. We have a really robust agenda. I'm Mia Blum. I'm the co-chair of the Commission on Sustainability. Our co-chair, Jared, has an excused absence for today. And I'd like to kick it over, I think, to the office for some updates, but I don't see Ava.
No, Ava's she's on vacation. She was gonna try to call in, but I'm gonna handle the office updates. Natalie, do you mind sharing your screen with the slides?
Yes, I'm unfamiliar with WebEx, so give me just a moment, but I got it coming up.
Yep. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Amy Gilder-Basati. I'm the Sustainability Manager with the Office of Sustainability.
All right, are we good to go?
Yep, and you can go to the next slide and we'll provide an overview of the agenda. We'll go through our office and commission updates, and then the theme of the meeting is transportation as a sector for climate action, with Valerie Brope, the climate and resilience manager for the office, going over the connection of this topic to the sustainability and climate action plans. We have Eli with the Department of Planning, who will be going through providing an overview of Baltimore's transportation history. Sean Burnett from the Department of Transportation will be joining us to talk about their work with Complete Streets and Sustainable Transportation. And then we have Miriam with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, who will be talking about the Bikeable Baltimore Region project. And then we will also have an announcement. Delegate Lewis was tentatively going to join us and is unable to make it, but we have information about an event coming up in January that she wanted us to share. And then we'll also have discussion about the Commission's upcoming plans for the next year. Next slide. So updates from our office. We don't have the link available yet, but we wanted to share that our environmental offset grants program will be open starting on December 2nd, and there'll be an information session for that grant application on December 17th. The Office of Sustainability, we, in addition to overseeing implementation of the various plans, we also handle environmental reviews, and through those reviews we collect offset monies, and we have a grants program that awards funds for projects that restore and expand tree canopy, improve water quality, and improve quality of life and habitat. The awards will range from $5,000 to $75,000, and Rachel and Grace will be getting that information out we'll be doing an email blast. So if you're signed up for our newsletter, you'll get that email blast with all the details when we have that available. Next slide. And speaking of the newsletter, there's a QR code if you want to sign up. The November newsletter came out this week with information about holiday tips, leaving the leaves, and our usual information about events and jobs and funding opportunities. And then I'll pass it over to Mia for roll call.
Okay, I think we have quite a few commissioners here, so I'll just go down the list. Donzel Brown.
Present.
Phil Costa.
Here.
Gary Crum. Lisa Ferretto.
Present.
Morgan Grove has an excused absence. He's actually teaching during this time. Bill Joyner. Earl Johnson. Nicolette Lewis-Saint.
Here.
Councilwoman Felicia Porter. Inez Robb.
Here.
Bryant Smith. Stephanie Smith. And Ben Zychak.
Present.
Thank you all. So We have just a couple of updates here, and Amy, I might need your help to put
Yeah.
the Legistar link in chat. So there actually was a hearing for the Infrastructure and Urban Meadows bill. Of many of the amendments that were suggested were actually taken into consideration. And so it is now before the mayor as the study and report on sustainable vegetation management. So there will be a link in chat to take a look and see what that looks like. Thank you all for your feedback and your and weighing in, and hopefully we'll see what the outcome will be. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Valerie to start our transportation, climate action transportation.
Thanks, Mia. Yes, thank you. So can you go to the next slide, please?
One more.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so just a little bit background on the sustainability plan and the climate action plan and how transportation is considered and feeds into those two plans. As we know, we have these different themes within the sustainability plan that link all of them. So transportation's integrated throughout that. That is actually a really big topic when we exchange with the public. Next slide, please. So looking at connections, this actually isn't the right slide.
I should have removed that slide. I'm sorry.
Okay, next one, please. All right, so just going a little bit into the climate action plan. As a reminder, our goal for the city is by 2045 to be at net zero for greenhouse gas emissions. So that means by 2030, we're looking at 60% reductions over the 2007 baseline. Within the analysis done regularly on GHG and greenhouse gas emissions for the city, transportation is not the highest buildings actually are in the city, but throughout the state, transportation is actually the highest greenhouse gas emissions producer for the state. So it does play a very pivotal role in achieving that goal. Next slide, please. And just again, another reminder within the climate action plan, we do have some guiding principles where we're really trying to look at issues comprehensively and how they affect equity and how we practice and behave as city government and so on. So just wanted to put that out there because you'll see that a lot of these issues that we talk about related to transportation aren't, just in a silo of transportation. They're very much throughout and connected to other topics. Next slide, please. So the climate action plan sections, just again, another little reminder for those of you who don't look at the climate action plan and sustainability plans as often as we do at our office, within our office, is that the climate action plan actually builds on the sustainability plan. So there's a very robust section around climate resilience in the sustainability plan. We also have the disaster preparedness plan and several other plans in the city that discuss greenhouse gas and climate resiliency as a whole and different strategies for that. So the climate action plan focuses on the greenhouse gas emissions and the goal for the city with that. And transportation is actually the one that has the most actions related to it in that plan. Next slide, please. So the priorities within the transportation section of the climate action plan are, improving public transit accessibility. When we've talked to the public, by and large, that is the biggest topic people care about, or at least communicate about in terms of climate resilience in the city. Is really, having, convenient, accessible public transportation that's reliable and that has a perception of being safe. It's also building on the Complete Streets plan that DOT has produced in the city. So that's, really looking at making things more bikeable and walkable. And then increased opportunities for charging and sharing electric vehicles. We do know that there's a lot of legislation out there and some laws that have been enacted around increasing electric vehicle adoption within the state. In addition to, traditional vehicles like cars and trucks, also, we see a huge increase in things like e-bikes and so on. So that, pertains not only to transportation because it fuels that, but also to electricity, in the grid itself. And then, of course, encouraging carpooling and van pooling. Next slide, please. So this is this in the next few slides are just a rundown of some of the actions that are in the climate action plan related to this strategy. But as you'll see, the common themes that I mentioned were really around making things more accessible, more convenient, reorienting our neighborhoods and communities to be more transit oriented. Micro mobility, really finding ways to get from here to there in a very small space without getting in your car and your fossil fuel car and driving. And also prioritizing transportation in low-income neighborhoods and those that need more transportation options, more transit options. We also have several actions in that relate to the public and to municipal employees around rideshare and incentives that would help people participate in those types of programs. Next slide, please. And then, continuing with that, looking at, car-free areas and how we can get gas stations to start installing EV chargers and getting more of an EV network around the city, both in consideration given to places that have more EVs currently or places that, we would need to increase that in order for people to be adopting electric vehicles. This is also something, in terms of considerations, electric vehicles can be more expensive. So making sure that we're looking at what types of incentives are out there, either us giving them or promoting them that are at the state or federal level so that more people can afford to purchase these types of vehicles. Also looking at the municipal fleets, the city does own a good deal of vehicles and, how those can get transitioned into electric vehicles, which of course, does incur a cost and also, needs training and things like that for municipal employees. So, how we would transition the city from using its current fleet to starting to purchase and utilize electric vehicles moving forward. Next slide, please. And then, just finally, looking at things like route optimization and so on that tie into our municipal fleets to make sure that there's not additional, greenhouse gas emissions coming out of routes when they can be optimized. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, some considerations. This was really the topic, at least in the climate action plan, that we heard people talking about the most and that we received the most public comments on was really around the public transit system in the city. We're largely bus, there are some other options, but, that is the big one. And MTA is operated by the state. So that means that, when we're looking at taking these actions, we really need to be partnering with the state because the city itself does not control the bus routes and the availability and so on. That is also something that, as the state is looking to transition buses to electric, that's looking at, that we do have to anticipate that that's going to be a great expense to them. So things like address, we'll have to work with them closely because, looking at what residents in the city would like to see, in terms of more routes and more routes that go to places, to get people to places they'd like to be going. Expanding that is something we'd have to be working with MTA on as well, because, as they're investing in those fleets, it might be a little difficult for them to, invest in additional routes. So we'll have to be working with them closely. And then, of course, looking at considerations like, equity issues around EV charging, really instituting things like walkability in community development as things are being approved for new development and so on. And then, just behavior change. That's really a big theme throughout the any of our plans, really climate action plan, sustainability plan, and so on, is getting people comfortable with and ready to adopt big changes. Things like in terms of transportation, if you choose to decide to no longer have a vehicle and either turn to a bicycle or a public transit and so on, that's a big change for people. So, really helping to get some of those resources and education and incentive programs promoted to folks. And I think that's okay. And so in terms of the connections to the plans, I don't know if you want to take any questions or if we want to just move on to the next section. But, these are the transportation piece is a huge part of the climate action plan and sustainability plans. So really, this is a core issue that we're looking at now and moving forward.
And Gail, you can unshare the, not Gail, Natalie, you can unshare the slides.
Denzel?
Yeah, I had a question. I live and I work downtown. There's a fleet of parking enforcement vehicles that park on the streets. And I don't know what we could possibly inquire about doing that. There's also a garage on Saratoga and Guilford is city owned and has not been used at all for several years. And I don't know if that could be, and I know a lot of city workers, I turned to my left, I'm looking at City Hall, I can see you guys. And I know that garage has not been used for several years. And could the city transport that into electric vehicles, charging stations, or do something more sustainable with that piece of property? It's a block wide, and there's never been a car in it, and it's owned by the city.
Wow. That's certainly something I'd love to hear more about and see, when we talk to folks. I'm not really sure of, which agency owns it and so on. And, but, that's definitely, that's kind of when we're looking. And the parking authority actually has gotten some grant funding to start doing some EV chargers throughout the city. So they're working on some plans for that now. So, certainly let's follow up afterwards, and I could certainly inquire if there's anything already in plans for that space. I don't particularly know of any at least that I know of.
Yeah, I have not heard. And when I mentioned the parking authority, the vehicles are not EV right now, and they probably take about 2 to 3 blocks worth of parking, which is ironic. I know. They take up 2 or 3 blocks of parking downtown just for their vehicles to, charge people parking tickets that none of us like. So that could be more efficiently done from my perspective.
Inez?
Yes. Where I live, we've got in my block, especially in a few other blocks, we've got where our cars are constantly being hit. Meaning people are turning the corner either left or right, and at a red light, and we were trying to figure out what can we do to kind of stop that. Where some people's cars have been hit 3 and 4 times, and they are in the house, and people are just turning the corner crazy, and boom. So I don't know whether that's something that a conversation that need to be had, or whether that's in the workings, but it was something I was asked, residents are asking me to bring it up to see if there's anything that can be done.
Sure. So that, would be something I would say to bring to DOT, or to your council person to start, some conversations, because, that's, where the roadways are. That's not really so much part of, our climate action plans and sustainability plans, but that's definitely something on the neighborhood level. I would definitely, certainly try to reach out to some of the liaisons at community liaisons at DOT, or council person, or even some of your community planners.
So Valerie, thank you for grounding our conversation around transportation in both plans, or all of the plans. We're actually going to go next to Eli so that we can learn a little bit more about transportation history in Baltimore.
Sounds good. Well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see a few familiar faces and to see some new folks as well. Amy and I were recalling that I presented a version of this talk to the Sustainability Commission in January 2020, I think, just a few months before the pandemic started. It was also originally developed, and I sort of continued to deliver it as part of the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance Transportation 101 course, which is sort of a training program for citizen advocacy around sort of transportation in the Baltimore region. So the oh no, WebEx needs to be granted permission for screen sharing. Jesus Christ. I'll be right back.
Denzel, did you have your hand up from earlier, or did you have something? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I put that down. That was from
That's
earlier.
okay.
Very good.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. Let me go ahead and find my slides here, and okay, okay, here we go. So just to kick things off, one of the best ways that we have of learning about the sort of like the current states, we're going to kind of start at the present, work our way back to the past, and then kind of take a lightning quick tour through 150, close to 200 years of Baltimore transportation history. And I told Amy that we would stick to sort of like around 20 minutes. So we'll see how what we get to and what we don't. But a quick question to pose for you all to respond in the chat. There's almost 1.5 million workers in the Baltimore metro area. That's Baltimore City, Baltimore County, the surrounding Anne Arundel, the surrounding counties. So what do you think is the share of people who work from home? And what do you think is the share of people that drove to work alone? So I'll pause to let folks sort of like think that one through and sort of drop some numbers in the chat with your best guess. So, and the reason that I ask is that part of the story that we're looking at is how did the giveaway. We'll let folks kind of like come in with those answers, so I don't want to spoil the plot here. But the part of the story here is that Baltimore City as a region is significantly dependent on automobiles. That's what around 2 in 3 workers drove to work alone, and the share of workers when we sort of started early pandemic, sort of doing this presentation again, often folks would guess pretty high numbers for the share of workers who work from home. I think even in the chat here today, we have ranging from 4% to 40% for this work from home. But the most current numbers that we've got are actually that it's now less than 2 in 10 workers work from home. More than 8 in 10 are traveling to work, and around 7 in 10 are make that trip by driving alone. And the reason that so many people are driving alone to work is in part because it is in fact faster. The average commute to work in the Baltimore area is for people driving alone is a little less than half an hour, but it's almost an hour for people who are relying on the bus or other public transit. And so, how did we end up in a situation where the sort of balance is weighted so heavily towards automobiles being often the most convenient and easiest way of getting to where you need to be. So part of the story here is the just what sometimes gets referred to as the geometry of transportation, the fact that automobiles and related automobile related land uses such as on-street parking, parking structures, parking lots, take up more space than the kinds of land uses that you need for other forms of transportation. So you can just see, for instance, the amount of road space, the amount of street space that's required to transport 69 people on a bus, transport 69 people on bikes, or 69 people spread out across 60 cars. And so as the city has developed this kind of like increasing automobile dependence over the last 100 years or so, we see also a expansion of the city outwards into the surrounding region, and dramatic transformations in the physical landscape of the city that ultimately make it harder for people to get around without automobiles, and consequently in the present day make it harder for us to reduce auto dependence and decrease the share of carbon emissions related to transportation. So if we take a look back in time, if you want to just get like a little bit of a sense of how dramatic the transformation of sort of auto dependence in the 20th century has caused for the city of Baltimore, you can just take a look at the city from above in 1931, and you'll see there's several things that you won't see. Since we're in a virtual format and sort of trying to stay tight on time, I won't do this as the normal Q&A, but you may notice that MLK is nowhere to be found. I-83 is nowhere to be found. The highway to nowhere is nowhere to be found. This expansive sort of network of highways didn't exist even just before the World War II. And so as these highways were developed, the narrative that often gets told for the city of Baltimore's sort of trajectory in that post-World War II period is that we had this kind of like increasing growth in the first half of the 20th century, and then after World War II, people just decided that they wanted to move out to the suburbs, to have more space, have a white picket fence, and that this was kind of an inevitable story of urban change or decline. But Baltimore is actually distinct from a number of other cities in the Midwest that have experienced significant population loss in the post-World War II period, in as much that we are a city that has been losing population within at the center of a region that has continuously gained in population throughout that same time. And so what we see is, as Baltimore City has built out this more and more infrastructure to support automotive land uses, people have spread out over a larger and larger amount of area and required more and more driving and more automobile access in order to meet their regular daily needs. So sometimes I feel like I come off a little anti-car in this presentation, and so you'll forgive me if you get that impression. But of course, the stakes of this situation are quite real. The consequences of automobile dependence are incredibly significant, not just for the environmental sustainability, but for health and the economic vitality of the city writ large. So we're going to dip into just like a handful of examples that help to explain how it got to be the way that it is. So one of the real key things is, if we look back to the 19th century, the street itself was really not reserved for cars or in the same kind of way that it is presently understood to be. So it was effectively a public space, certainly not a public space that everyone had equal access to or equal opportunity to occupy. But you can see just in this 1850 lithograph, the sort of loading and unloading and private carts and horses and dogs and people walking, and all the different kinds of uses that are involved in that space. And it's in this sort of dense urban mixed use context of the street that we begin to have the creation of what was initially known as the omnibus. Sort of, I compare them sometimes to Cinderella carriages, horse-drawn carriages initially running just on wheels and then eventually running on fixed rails in order to ease the burden of the horses pulling them down city streets and through the city. Baltimore does have a claim to fame. This sort of like early omnibus system developed into the electric streetcar. Baltimore, you'll sometimes see, has a claim to fame as one of the the first city in the US to run an electric streetcar line. It turns out we are the first city to run an electric streetcar line. We are not the first city to run a successful electric streetcar line. Our first electric streetcar only lasted a few years, but the technology was successful in Richmond and other cities, and ultimately sort of like took over as the main form of transportation in Baltimore in the late 19th and early 20th century. It was really built out from the downtown core into this like broader regional network, where actually back in 1914 you could probably get from Towson to Catonsville faster than you would necessarily be able to get from one to the other using the Maryland Transit Administration sort of services today. So and it is this system that really drove the city's growth in that pre-World War II period. The sort of like all of our row house neighborhoods, for the most part, really developed sort of clustered around the streetcar lines and sort of building out year by year, sort of farther and farther away, because everyone wanted to be as close to this convenient access to downtown or other workplaces and destinations as possible. And so this is, in fact, what kind of developed even the modern idea of a downtown, is that that sort of like mixed use of residential and commercial that we saw in that initial lithograph. The sort of combination of the railroad and the streetcar led to this kind of this radically different land use pattern, where we have increasing centralization of commercial industrial uses in the core, and this increasingly residential and sometimes segregated residential uses going out towards the periphery. So to enter the automobile, which initially was really a luxury product. This is a picture from 1911 of a Spohr Model 40C Roadster down in Carroll Park. The inflation-adjusted cost for this vehicle is actually over $76,000, which I can assure you the sort of average wages of a laborer or carpenter in Baltimore City at the time, this was very much out of reach for most people. And this wasn't just the context in Baltimore for automobiles. It was really around in cities around the U.S. that initially automobiles were seen effectively as a menace. You can see the clouds around this this speeding chauffeur here are all from the headlines where sort of documenting the injuries and crashes caused by the introduction of automobiles into the sort of like dense American and European cities. And you see this also in the crash death rates, which skyrocketed between the early 19-teens and the 1930s. Because ultimately, though, the city was kind of faced with this choice of do we make the city safer for people who walk and take transit and sort of slow down drivers, or do we make the city more convenient for people to drive? This was not a settled question for a good while there, in part because of the continued dominance of the streetcar system. You can see this is from a 1926 report to the Traffic Survey Commission, looking at the residences of people who worked in the central business district. You can see on the left some of these the sort of more elite streetcar suburbs, such as Garwin Oaks or Roland Park, sort of like spread in the outlying areas of the city, and the areas closer into the central core of downtown that relied more exclusively on the streetcar as the way to get around. And this distribution, sort of when you map it out, you can see just what a small share initially automobiles were of the city's overall commuting share. So, however, by the 1930s and increasingly in the 1940s and 50s, this sort of like consensus of opinion around sort of like at least elite opinion around sort of what we should do with transportation in the city of Baltimore began to change. The Baltimore Police Department hired their first traffic engineer in 1937. His tuition for the Harvard Bureau of Street Traffic Research was paid for by the Baltimore Sun papers, who got an exclusive interview with him after he started the job, sort of effectively, in the interview itself, effectively lobbying him to endorse highways as the best way for to build out the city's transportation system. And the sort of increasing interest in reducing density and sort of spreading residential development farther to the outlying areas coincided with a sort of new understanding of how cities should work. You see on the right this the concentric zone model developed by Ernest Burgess, sort of illustrating this concept of how he and other city planners in the early 20th century believed that cities should work. The idea that there are areas that are the zone of workingmen's home that you can see here, in a residential zone and a commuter zone, sort of having strict segregation both by race as well as by segregating different kinds of uses, restricting industrial areas to industrial development to some of the closer in parts of the city that were largely occupied, both in Baltimore as well as Chicago, where the example on the right comes from, by Black households as well as more recent immigrant households, and excluding those kinds of uses from the wealthier, farther out areas of the city. The automobile ownership, though, didn't remain an elite activity for very long, especially in the post-World War II period. We have sort of like the really skyrocketing access to automobiles as the cost of automobiles comes down substantially. And it's in this period that you begin to see a new challenge, because it was one thing for transit to be dominant when that was the only way to get around. But when the cost of automobiles came down and city planners, through a variety of infrastructure and land use policies, are making it better and easier and more convenient to drive than to use transit, then it puts the transit services at a significant disadvantage. And so the Baltimore Transit Company and other major urban transit companies were actually losing money throughout the 1940s and unable to invest in their capital stock. Part of this challenge was, again, back to this question of the geometry of the sort of infrastructure itself, the competition between the streetcars and the automobiles competing for limited road space, and which would mean that streetcars could move less quickly, and also if you were a driver, you all of a sudden had a vested interest in getting streetcars off the road. I'm going to skip over just a little bit so I can wrap up in a timely way. This dynamic, though, the solution to this was not to invest in the city's streetcar system or transit, but actually to begin shutting down all of the streetcar lines and converting streetcar service over to bus service, which ultimately led to a significant degradation in the quality of this service and significant increases in the cost to consumers. So you can see that what once was a robust regional map of all of these frequent service rail lines begins to become marked by these points where the only connections between the lines are provided by often substandard bus service. We also see the sort of channelization of streets and the transformation of road design in order to make driving more accessible. Huge amounts of public funding going to the construction of the Jones Falls Expressway, as well as off-street parking, sort of putting our public funds to subsidize the creation of an auto-centric city, as well as significant subsidies from the federal government starting in the 1950s, which were sort of allowed the realization of plans like this 1942 East-West Expressway study from Robert Moses. All of these ideas that had previously just existed on paper all of a sudden become much more possible when we have the sort of open spigot of federal funding made available in the late 1950s and early 1960s. I'll conclude with the sort of consequence being that the people who remained as transit riders were disproportionately Black and low income by 1960, something that continues to exist up through the present day, which has sort of led to the often the politicization of funding for transit, difficulty of mobilizing sort of people in favor of supporting transit and other forms of more sustainable active transportation. And sort of continuous attacks on the both operating and capital funding for this, which was something that we saw coming and have been but remain sort of a significant challenge up through the present day. So in the early 1960s, at the verge of us eliminating all streetcar service, it was clear that this was going to result in major service reductions. And despite sort of like the possibility of grand plans sketched out for the Baltimore Metro system, a lot of those ideas ultimately went unrealized, and even with the eventual switch to public operation of the city's transit system, we still have really struggled to be able to provide maintain transit in Baltimore City as a competitive option to automobiles, given these sort of disproportionate investments and political support. So I'll wrap up there. Happy to answer any questions. I can drop a link to the full slides in the chat. I know that's kind of like a lot to go through in the compressed amount of time, but hopefully some at least a few new things in there for folks to might be interested in.
Eli, we unfortunately can't take questions at this point because we have our next speaker has some time constraints. If people can put their questions in chat, that would be fantastic. And we'll hear from Sean Burnett next talking about Complete Streets.
Thank you very much. As soon as I figure out how to share, we are on. Let's see. How we doing? Can people see stuff?
We can see it.
Okay, okay. How's that look on your screen? More or less like a presentation?
You might need to hit the button on the lower right that makes it full screen. We see your slides and we see the preview on the left.
Oh, I see. Okay, hold on. I apologize, I'm not familiar with WebEx, so we are learning as we work. Let's see here. Oh, I think I figured it out. Hold on. How's that?
It's the same, but I
Did I
think
do
you're
it?
trying to just keep going, showing it this.
Okay,
I think it's good.
great. So we'll just go ahead. My name is Sean Burnett. I am the planning chief or capital planning chief, depending on who you ask, for Baltimore City DOT. Just very briefly, some background about myself. I am a transportation planner by trade. I was the transportation commissioner in the city of Toledo, Ohio for a time. I was also the active transportation branch manager in Washington, D.C. And most recently, I was the assistant deputy mayor for economic development. So I was asked to come here today and walk through some of our efforts as they pertain to complete streets and active transportation, particularly some of the safety pieces and the sustainability pieces. So I'll go through some of that. This is just a org overview. So I sit within the Planning and Sustainable Transportation Division under Stu Sirota, who's the deputy director. I myself have 8 planners who work on a number of different projects, all transportation related. Going through, we also have a number of DOT advisory committees that are all...
Sorry, Sean. I want to stop you just for a second. Your slides aren't advancing for us. So I'm still seeing your first slide.
Well, what do you know? All right, tell you what. Let's...
There you go. Now it's caught up now.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to do this then. So we have a number of advisory committees related to Complete Streets. Unfortunately, the majority of the meetings, because of the holiday break, have not been finalized for the new year yet, the schedules. However, if you pay attention to DOT social media or any of the direct pages related to these projects, we will be updating them as soon as we have those dates and schedules set. So the Complete Streets Advisory Committee is a cross-agency committee that reviews a number of different items related to the Complete Streets Ordinance, as well as its implementation. That includes agencies such as DOT, DPW, the Department of Planning, Housing, Fire Department, Police. This is a large city effort to kind of like work through the ordinance, the mandate, and the technical assistance for what we're trying to do as a city. We also have the MBAC, that's the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Commission. This was created, I believe, in 2017. I want to say 2016, 2017. This is a mixed it is a number of agencies sit as commissioners, but we also have public-facing commissioners, citizen commissioners. The MBAC is under a little bit of work right now, trying to improve it, streamline it. We are looking for a number of new commissioners, and I'll do a plug towards the end. But this is a really exciting forum for people to learn about active transportation projects within Baltimore City, get updates as to them, deliver feedback, as well as all of the bike pursuant kind of like policy and event features within the city that Baltimore DOT is involved in. We also have the Micromobility Committee. This is another committee that was created. Micromobility, if you're not familiar, is a stand-in term for our scooters and our bikes, those rentable pieces of transportation equipment. And so the Micromobility Committee oversees the continual operation of our private partners who have contracts with the city to operate within the city. So within that meeting and that committee, they review the operating standards, make sure that these private groups are doing what we've asked them to do, as well as receive information and data on how these vehicles are being used, which we then use that data to inform our further planning efforts. So next, I'll kind of walk through a number of, very quickly, some of our current sustainable transportation projects and initiatives. So this slide is just kind of illustrating the vast number of grants that the city is currently working through on a number of different projects. Some of the highlights there is the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods grant. This is the RCN. It likely won't exist next year. So we are doubling down on our efforts to bring this money down and then also program it. The two large RCN projects that we are working towards right now include the Druid Park Lake Drive, where we are reconstructing Druid Hill Park Drive to decrease the level of disconnect between the community there and the green space. And then also, obviously, the West Baltimore United project, which will do a lot to alleviate kind of the large swath of community that was removed during the that Highway to Nowhere project that Mr. Poussin mentioned in his previous presentation. We're also doing a number of different things, a lot of monies coming in through Maryland Bikeways grants. These are state level grants. We're using these to bring our plans for active transportation routes up to 100% and then move them to construction. I also want to bring up the fact that we are working through our SS4A. Our SS4A is related towards our Towards Zero initiative. Towards Zero, if you're not familiar, is the city's commitment to reducing traffic fatalities down to 0 by the year of 2030. We are working very hard towards that goal. The SS4A, or the Safe Streets for All Planning Grant. I think I'm going to touch on it later on a later slide, but it is a large 4-step initiative that the city is undertaken. It has many moving parts, but some of those things will be coming out in the next year. And so I'll walk us through some of those later. So as I mentioned, the West Baltimore United Project, these are a couple of photos from some of our community engagement. We are going to be doing much more community engagement throughout this next year. We are expected to complete our 30 and 60% designs sometime by the middle of 2026. These designs will then be moved forward to 100% and then construction. Currently, we have enough federal funding to pay for the planning process, and we are applying for the construction grant now with the hope that we will be awarded in 2025 and have enough money to make a dramatic improvement to the quality of life for the communities on both the north and south side. Here are some more renderings. These are some of the current renderings that include, maybe you can see the future red line, which has identified this route as one of their primary alternatives, or preferred alternatives rather. And also you can see what we have here, which is a CAP. CAP is an industry term for essentially building basically a big bridge over the highway, which will allow for limited construction on top of it, as well as green space. The hope is that this will contribute to a much more connected feel between the historic north and south neighborhoods bordering the highway to nowhere. We are also progressing currently the MLK Side Path project from 30 to 90%. MLK, Mr. Poussin also covered this in his piece, another large highway project that is kind of separated some communities, notable communities, not only east to west, but also north to south in the pursuit of speedy connections for single occupancy vehicles. So the side path will run essentially from West Reed to Russell, and then Russell to Ostend. This will connect to some of the cycling and active transportation facilities that we have near to the stadium, south of Pigtown. This is a very exciting project because I don't know if anyone else here is interested, but I am certainly interested in a more direct bike route between my house and Camden Yards, because that means I can eat more hot dogs. Yeah, there we go. I see a hand. So that project is also underway. We also have our large kind of active transportation project, which is the Baltimore Greenway Trail Network. This is a multi-agency, multi-phase project that is meant to essentially connect green spaces to Baltimore communities citywide. In fact, it is meant to create kind of a very large loop where someone could get on the trail, either walking or rollerblading or using a bicycle or any of these other kind of active forms of transportation, and basically hop from green space to green space throughout the city without ever having to interfere with traffic or ride with traffic. Currently, we are working on completing the 33rd Street Greenway, the 33rd Street that runs from St. Paul to Hillen. That's the portion that touches upon a number of different neighborhoods, including CHM. This will be brought to 100% this year. We also have the Highlandtown-Greektown connection. This is the Norfolk Southern line, abandoned line that runs north to south on the east side of the city. the Department of Planning has been hard at work over the last couple of years in coordination with DOT to obtain control over that egress, that large green strip. We are getting very close to making an offer that we're hoping Norfolk Southern cannot refuse. And then after that, we will be progressing plans from 30% to 100% and looking for funding for construction. We also have a piece on Boston Street. Boston Street is another kind of overbuilt roadway with high-speed traffic, higher congestion, with very little pedestrian or active transportation connections. That project had been on hold because of projected complications with the Red Line preferred alternative. However, we've gotten the go-ahead from MTA this year to move ahead with our designs. So we will be progressing the Boston Street corridor to 100%, and then also the Middle Branch segment. Excuse me, that is the portion on the east side of kind of the stadium area, moving up through the neighborhood onto Light Street, connecting with the Inner Harbor cycle track, or you could call it the Harbor Walk. And so that portion is also going to be brought to 100% design. I have only been with DOT now this is my second month. And so we do not have currently, I did not inherit, unfortunately, a lot of 100% plans. So this year, in terms of active transportation, we have some limited construction, but we are repairing our project delivery pipeline, and stay tuned. In the next 12 months, my hope is to have plenty of things moving through construction, through planning, and we should have a lot of exciting news as the year kind of goes on. I'll also plug that our Washington Ave bikeway, which is a 2.2 mile facility between Sinclair and Alisana Street, is also moving forward this year to 100%. And that's going to include a number of other kind of quality of life improvements for the neighborhood, ADA ramps, intersection treatments. This will produce a road diet to slow traffic. And so this is also another exciting project. Acknowledging that I am probably taking too long and I have quite a few more slides, I'll be very brief. But the Vision Zero, or our Towards Zero action plan, we are coming out with our action plan later this year. We have been working very hard with our consultants and with our Towards Zero team to try and move this along quickly. We also have a $9.9 million grant to pilot the recommendations of the aforementioned action plan. So the hope here is that we have a smooth transition between the finalization of the action plan and then its suggested implementations. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. Here are a couple of slides. I do not manage our transit division. That is our other chief, Brett Thorne. But for the sake of this group's level of interest, I wanted to include a number of small modifications that we are making to the Charm City Circulator. The Cherry route is a new route this year. It started in June. It connects a number of new developments and in specifically to Cherry Hill. Cherry Hill has a stunning statistic of having 47.5% of households do not own a car. And so this is a very exciting new route that connects the members of that community directly to 2 large health centers, as well as a number of smaller employment sectors. So this was a big win for us this year. And then we also have a proposal to modify the Orange Line in order to more fully service the PSO, or Perkins Somerset Old Town HABC project, or co-HABC DHCD State of Maryland. There's a lot of partners on that one. But anyway, we're going to try and give those people some better connections to our downtown. I don't know if Eli mentioned it, but this what we call the spatial disconnect, where the places where our citizens live and the places where our citizens work are not always the same place. And so we have to bridge the gap somehow. And our public transit is one of the best ways to do it. Some other big projects, I know it sounded like somebody mentioned this earlier about electrification of fleet, but the city is working on some electrification pilots, including our Charm City Circulator electrification pilot. We got $3.5 million in order to purchase 3 new electric buses. Believe it or not, buses are that expensive, which is why I don't own one yet. But we are also in the early stages of our transit equity gap study, which is another large initiative undertaken by the planning department in order to address the aforementioned spatial disconnect. How do we route our public transit in the best way in order to connect the people who need it most to the places where they need to go the most? So that will also be completed this year. That will also be very exciting. And then finally, our e-bike voucher. Much requested, very exciting. People liked this one. We might do it again. We had $750 to $2,000 as a voucher to help cover people's investment into e-bikes. E-bikes are a great way to get people out of their vehicles because it does not have the same kind of physical requirements that, say, a bicycle would have. It allows for individuals to carry or traverse with more weight, and allows you to, Mr. Poussin is a very nice one. And I've seen he rides past my row home almost every day, with children in tow. So the e-bike is a very exciting opportunity, to get our citizens out of their cars and into a bike, to use some of our, exciting and very safe facilities. And then to close things out, just some of the things, ways to get involved. And Amy, let me know if you would like me to send you a copy of this presentation afterwards that you can share out. But I did mention this before, MBAC is currently accepting applications for new commissioners. That QR code will take you to the application. You do not need to be a transportation planner. You don't even need to be a very good cyclist. We are looking for engaged, warm bodies, people who are excited about the city's prospective active transportation network and its expansion. So send us an application. Also, our Streets of Baltimore page is the best way to learn and keep updated about all of the different projects. That's not just the active transportation projects, that's all of the DOT projects. And then it looks like Shana would appreciate it if everyone let their elected officials know that you want multimodal infrastructure. And then also to remind everyone to submit 311 requests. If there are things in your neighborhood that you see that you feel are dangerous, could use improvement, need repair, street signs are down. These are all the sorts of things that 311 is a really effective tool at. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're a little early for this one, but yeah, Bike to Work Week. It's coming up in May. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. And I'm putting links in the chat, doing quick Google searches to get the links from that last slide into the chat for people.
Thanks, Amy.
Yep.
Sean, thank you very much for your thorough presentation here. Look forward to getting the slides. We're going to go next to Miriam Sultan with the Bikeable Baltimore Region Project. It's a long title, I think, there.
Okay, you need me to share on my end? Let me get that up. I also am not familiar with WebEx. Share, PowerPoint. Okay. No, not that. No. I guess that's good enough. Sorry, 1 second. All right. I think that should work. Can everyone see the slides? Great. So my name is Mariam Sultan, and I'm here from Baltimore Metropolitan Council to present about the Bikeable Baltimore Region project. We have developed, in conjunction with the counties and Baltimore City, a plan for a safe and connected biking network that takes plans that are already on the master plans of the region and prioritizes them into what we are calling our proposed regional network. Let me just go through and tell you about how we're doing that. Let's see. Okay. So the vision statement is that the Baltimore region will work together to create a bicycle network that expands opportunities for users of all ages and abilities. This connected network will support improved safety, mobility, and equitable access to jobs, schools, housing, transit, parks, and other daily destinations. And you can see on the screen the project goals: advancing equity, connecting people to places, considering context, emphasizing collaboration, improving safety and accessibility, maintaining the network, setting attainable ambitions, supporting community development, and supporting environmental and health benefits, which we know is really important to everyone in this group, especially. Active transportation is a great way to get cars off the road, lessen emissions, improve the health of the region. Over the summer, we had our first public comment phase, which we call the listening phase. During that, we had 10 public meetings, one in each one of our jurisdictions, and then 2 virtual ones. We received almost 250 comments, had 61 on-site community interviews, which we call handlebar interviews, and had 163 people fill out our survey. Out of the people who we asked, 93% said a regional bike network is important to them, which we think is a really strong support statistic here. And we also asked what would make the regional bike network a success. The top elements are here. I'll just highlight a few. People want bicycle facilities that are protected from the road, separated from cars. That's really important. Accessibility for all users. Driver education awareness came up a lot, especially as we asked also, what's your least favorite thing about biking in the region? And cars came up as the #1 least favorite thing for bikers in the region. So just teaching drivers how to respect other modes of transit on the roads is something that people are really wanting to see. And then inclusivity and community engagement were also really highlighted as part of what would make this network a success. These are some of the pop-up interviews, aka handlebar interviews. We did over 135 because we had 61 in the summer and then continued through the fall, going out and about to different counties around the region, talking to people about what they like about biking, what they don't like, and what their suggestions are for improving biking. We also have a lot more examples of these on our website and story map. Currently, we are in the presenting phase, in which we are sharing the proposed regional bike network, which we developed with community input, with data analysis, sort of in a qualitative and quantitative approach here. The comments are welcome until January 10th. We have the project website and the interactive story map as places to go and learn more. On the story map, you'll find the comment map, which is the map of the proposed regional network, in which you can put points, comment points on the map where you think that maybe there really should be something on the map, or we have something on there which you feel like is not for all ages and abilities and should not be included as part of the regional network. There's more information on the site. We're having 2 public meetings, one in person on December 10th at 6 p.m. at Baltimore Unity Hall, which is in Baltimore City, and a virtual meeting on December 12th. You go to publicinput.com/bikebaltimoreregion, which is our website, to learn more. This is a really short presentation, just getting a little bit of a intro to the project. So this is a screenshot of the proposed regional network currently. So we classify bikeways in 3 ways here. So there's regional bikeways that are serving as the backbone of the network. community bikeways that are connecting major centers within each jurisdiction, and local bikeways, which are helping people get from the regional and community bikeways into their towns, into their neighborhoods, to their home. So those are the smaller lines. And as part of this primary picture here, all the bikeways are comfortable and safe for bikers of all ages and abilities. So that means they're either well separated from traffic or on roads with low speed limits and low car traffic. Building on that, because looking at only bikeways that were planned or existing that were low stress wasn't connecting the network in the way that we hoped. So then we branched out to less comfortable bikeways and high stress bikeways. So these are highlighted in, the less comfortable bikeways are highlighted in yellow, and the high stress bikeways are highlighted in orange. So they're on the map as potential areas to put in a more lower stress, a more protected bicycle facility. But currently there's no facility like that in the plans. Then we've circled in these dotted lines the gaps. So gaps are where there are no planned or existing facilities, but without something being built out there, the region won't really be connected in the way that would facilitate somebody biking, you know, from Westminster to Kent Island, for example. They would have to go through these areas which currently are gaps on the map. And so this is still just a draft, and we're really hoping to get a lot of feedback this round in order to make changes, make it more accurate to what the community wants to see, more responsive to the realities on the ground. And we would like you to go to our website, go to the story map, check out the process, check out this map, and input your comments and take our survey. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
And you can contact me or the project manager, Charlene Mingus, to learn more. Let me stop sharing. I'm not still sharing, right?
No, thank you,
Okay.
Mary. Really appreciate it. Amy, I think we have just an update for a few events that are coming up, and then we will open it up to discussion.
Okay. Natalie, do you mind bringing up the sharing the slides?
Sure thing. Let me get that.
If you go to the one, the save the date one. So
Boop. Hold on a second. Uh-oh. Exit. There we are.
Yep. So we had originally planned to have Delegate Lewis of the 46th District also part of this agenda. And she had shared with us that there are plans for having a forum envisioning Baltimore's transportation future on January 25th. So since she's not able to be here, we at least wanted to share that announcement and the information so that folks who are interested can save the date. The registration link is not available yet, but when that is available, we'll share it out in our sustainability newsletter. But we at least wanted to make that announcement since she wasn't able to join us tonight. And then next slide. And then also we wanted to remind folks the next Sustainability Commission meeting for December will be on December 18th. And that will be an in-person meeting, and it'll be hosted. Phil Costa, one of our commissioners, has offered to host it at the Baltimore Convention Center. And that meeting, the focus will be on sustainability and climate work for large public venues in Baltimore, with the Convention Center being one of those. And so we'll get to see, and also part of that, in addition to hearing from various speakers, there'll also be the opportunity to tour some of the different features that the Convention Center has to offer. So we wanted to point people out that the QR code to register is up in the corner. One thing to point out, the Convention Center is a really big set of buildings covering 2 blocks. The entrance for where we're going to be in the Sharp Street lobby, which Sharp Street is the street that kind of goes between the 2 halves of the convention center, and there's an elevated walkway. The entrance where we'll be at is you enter underneath that elevated walkway into the Sharp Street lobby. And 300 South Sharp Street is the address that you'll use for GPS. And so we'll also be sharing that information out in our next newsletter and email blast, and making sure that the commission members get those details. But I wanted to make sure to point that out since it's not a WebEx meeting and we'll be in person at the convention center.
I just want to add that registration for that is really important so that we can prepare. So if you are not a commissioner and are planning on attending, please register so that we can prepare for you, because that's going to be important for some of the content that we have for that meeting. So really looking forward to that. To come back to the transportation topic, I wanted to just open it up, see if any commissioners had any comments. Yes, Lisa.
I'll get the link in the chat, and Natalie, you can stop sharing.
Alrighty.
So do any commissioners have any questions about any of the content that we saw today? I know that there's a lot of content that moved pretty quickly. As we prepare for the next full year of content, we would like to actually approach the content again in January to talk about transportation. And we will be looking for any of your suggestions for some topics. Amy did place that in her prep email. So December 6th is when we're hoping to have the last call for that. We have a couple of topics that we have talked about. So we've been approaching meetings quarterly, and we've looked at nature in the city, and looking at like the landscape, and looking at beyond environmental literacy, and transportation again, and then community preparedness and environmental justice. So we are planning on sending out an email that has a couple of topics there. As a commissioner, if you are interested in presenting any information or helping to create an agenda that works best for the topic, please let us know. That's the type of information we want to have by the 6th. We will also hopefully address transportation again, because hopefully by then we'll have some updated information on, just how projects are moving forward, especially some of the funding for the projects, and just making sure that we are moving towards implementation. A lot of that will really go to inform the next sustainability plan as we look towards the future for Baltimore. So I wanted to pause there, see if any commissioners have any questions for any of our guests who are here. All right, you guys are all full of those Thanksgiving sides, just feeling all full and happy. Love it. So I think, Amy, I think that I've gotten everything that we were going to discuss here. Again, we have lots of great links that are in chat for all of the plans to follow up on public comment. Share those with your neighbors. Miss Inez, I think that it sounds like Sean is suggesting that you put a 311 request in for some of the challenges that your neighbors have been facing. And it could be that, maybe there needs to be someone take a look at how that corner is constructed. There might be something there that can be done.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Danielle, reach out to Amy about participating in a presentation. So with that, I think that we are at the end of our agenda. Look in your inbox for topics. Hope that you all have a great holiday, and we will see you in December. So the meeting adjourned.